When I collapsed at my graduation, the doctors called my parents 67 times. They never came. Days later, still hooked to machines, I saw 65 missed calls and a text. "We need you. Answer immediately." The microphone hit the floor before I did. I remember that detail with strange clarity. The hollow metallic crack of it against the stage, the feedback squeal cutting through 3,000 people, and then the ceiling of the Whitmore Auditorium tilting sideways in a way ceilings are not supposed to tilt. I was mid-sentence. My valedictorian speech. Paragraph 4, the one about resilience, which in retrospect is either the cruelest irony or exactly the right place to collapse. Then, nothing. I woke up 3 days later in the ICU of St. Marcus Medical Center with a blood pressure cuff inflating on my left arm, a woman I didn't recognize checking my pupils with a pen light, and my grandfather's hand wrapped around my right hand so completely it felt like a cast. He was still wearing the suit he'd pressed for graduation, dark navy, the pocket square I'd helped him fold that morning. He hadn't left. "There she is," he said, quiet, like he was talking to himself. It took me another 20 minutes to understand what had happened to me. Glioblastoma, a brain tumor the size of a golf ball sitting in my right temporal lobe, which the neurosurgeon, Dr. Amara Osi, would later explain had been growing quietly for somewhere between 1 and 2 years, hiding behind headaches I'd written off as stress, behind the fatigue I'd blamed on working 3 jobs, behind the word counts I couldn't hold in my head near the end of my senior thesis. Emergency craniotomy. 4 hours and 11 minutes on the table. I lost a significant amount of blood. The hospital had called my parents 67 times. They boarded the plane to Paris anyway. Let me tell you who I am before I tell you what happened, because the context matters. I'm Grace, 22 years old as of this past March, the first person in my immediate family to graduate from a 4-year university, valedictorian of my class at Alderman University with a 3.94 GPA in biochemistry. I did it in 4 years while working 30 to 40 hours a week across 3 jobs, morning barista at a campus coffee shop, weekend lab assistant at a private research facility, and occasional tutor for underclassmen who needed help with organic chemistry. I ate a lot of ramen. I slept about 5 hours a night. I applied for every scholarship that existed and got 3 of them, which together covered maybe 40% of my tuition. The rest, I assumed, came from a tuition fund my grandfather had set up for me. That assumption was the central lie of my entire adult life, but I didn't know that yet. My family, Dad, Thomas Whitfield, 54, financial advisor, the kind who is very good at managing other people's money and considerably worse with his own. Mom, Diane, 51, interior designer with expensive taste and a renovation habit that operates independently of budget. My sister Meredith, 26, a marketing coordinator who has always been, without question, my parents' first choice for everything. The one whose school play they attended, whose soccer games filled the bleachers, whose acceptance to a mid-tier state school prompted a catered celebration, while my full academic scholarship to Alderman was met with a nod. "And that's great, honey. I tell you this not to make you feel sorry for me. I tell you because patterns matter." And this one had been running for 22 years before it finally showed me its teeth. My grandfather, James Ellison, my mother's father, was a different story entirely. He'd built a small manufacturing business from scratch in the 1970s, sold it in 2003, and spent the subsequent 20 years being the most quietly decent person I have ever known. He drove a 10-year-old Buick. He brought his own lunch to his investment meetings. He read to me when I was small and argued with me when I got older, and always showed up. My grandmother Eleanor had died before I was born, but she had apparently left a piece of herself behind. A fund, specifically for me, established before my birth, grown over 2 decades of careful management. Enough, Grandpa would eventually tell me, to buy a house outright or start a business or do, in his words, whatever you need to do to never have to beg anyone for anything. I didn't know about any of this while I was eating ramen and picking up extra tutoring shifts and calculating to the dollar whether I could afford a new pair of shoes. My father knew. My father had always known. The first thing I noticed when I became conscious enough to notice things was that my grandfather looked old in a way he hadn't at 7 a.m. when he'd helped me zip the back of my graduation dress. He was 76. He was fine, but he had the particular exhaustion of someone who had been holding themselves together through willpower alone for 3 days, and the willpower was starting to show its seams. "They know," he said, once he was sure I was tracking. "They chose not to come." I opened my mouth. He shook his head. "Don't," he said gently. "Save your voice. Just listen." He told me the broad strokes, the hospital's calls, the missed flights. Not missed in the way of bad timing, missed in the way of being ignored. He told me that my mother had posted photos from Paris while I was still in surgery. "I saw them," he said. "Your cousin Delia called me." My phone was on the bedside table. I couldn't reach it without pulling the IV line. Grandpa picked it up and held it where I could see the screen. Meredith's Instagram, posted at 11:47 p.m. on the day I went into the OR. A photo of my mother and sister at the base of the Eiffel Tower. Champagne flutes raised, matching silk scarves. My mother laughing in that full, uninhibited way she almost never laughed at home. The caption read, "Finally, Paris family trip, no stress, no drama." 247 likes. A comment from my mother's college friend, "You deserve this." A reply from my mother, "We absolutely do." I looked at my grandfather. He looked back at me. There was nothing to say, so we didn't say anything. The missed calls came on day 4. I'd been moved out of the ICU and into a private room, smaller, smaller, quieter, with a window that looked onto a concrete parking structure, which I found oddly comforting in its ugliness. Dr. Osei had visited twice that morning, gone over the pathology report with me, explained the treatment plan in the careful, methodical way of someone who has learned to deliver difficult information at the exact pace the human brain can absorb it. The tumor was aggressive. Treatment would begin within the week. Radiation and chemotherapy concurrent. The surgery had removed approximately 90% of the visible mass. The remaining 10% was the variable that determined everything, and Dr. Osei was honest about the range of outcomes without being cruel about it. I liked her immediately. She was direct and unhurried, and she looked me in the eye the whole time, which sounds like a low bar, but isn't. She left around noon. Grandpa had gone to the cafeteria to eat something I'd made him promise to eat. My nurse, a woman named Rosario, who had been working the oncology floor for 14 years and had the calm efficiency of someone who has seen every version of the human response to terror, had just changed my IV bag. I picked up my phone. 65 missed calls, 31 from Dad, 22 from Mom, 12 from Meredith, no voicemails, one text from Dad sent at 6:47 a.m. We need you. Answer immediately. I stared at it for a long time. Not, we're coming. Not, we're so sorry. Not even, how are you? We need you. Present tense. Active voice. The subject of the sentence was them. My hands were very still. I noticed that. The stillness. The absence of the shaking I might have expected. What I felt wasn't rage. Not yet. It was something quieter. Something that had been building for 22 years and had finally reached the bottom of itself. I put the phone face down on the blanket. When Grandpa came back, I said, "They've been calling." He sat down. "I know. The text says they need me." He was quiet for a moment. "They found out about the money," he said. He explained it in pieces over the next 2 hours, the way you explain something to a person who is still post-surgical and shouldn't be upset. Careful, measured, pausing when my face told him to pause. My grandmother Eleanor had established the fund before my birth. It had grown over 22 years of compounding interest and Grandpa's careful management to just over $340,000. My father had known about it since my parents' marriage. My grandfather had made clear, repeatedly, that the fund was mine, not the family's, not negotiable, not subject to redistribution. It would transfer to me directly when I reached 22, or upon college graduation, whichever came first. 4 years ago, when I started at Alderman, my father had called my grandfather. He said he needed help with your tuition, Grandpa said. He said you were struggling and he couldn't cover the full amount. He asked me to write a check. I didn't say anything. I wrote it, Grandpa said, to him, because he was your father, and I trusted that. The check was for $41,200, my full first-year tuition at Alderman, plus room and board. He cashed it, Grandpa said, within 3 days. My tuition that year had been paid by the scholarship I'd earned. Room and board I'd covered through the campus job. The $41,200 had gone. I would later learn from bank records subpoenaed by Grandpa's attorney into a home renovation account. Marble countertops, a kitchen island, a primary bathroom remodel, the custom tile my mother had posted on her Facebook page in November of my freshman year. He'd called again the following year. Another check, $38,700. Different story. I needed a laptop, lab fees, the expense of senior year materials. Year 3, $20,400. A graduation fund, he'd told Grandpa, to make sure I could celebrate properly. Year 4, he'd asked for $44,000. By that point, Grandpa had quietly hired someone to verify where the previous checks had gone. The answer had arrived in a folder on his desk 3 weeks before my graduation. I was going to tell you at graduation, Grandpa said, after the ceremony. I'd prepared everything. He paused. Then you fell. I looked at the window, the parking structure. A seagull sitting on a concrete ledge, completely indifferent to all of this. How much is left? I asked. After what he took, Grandpa said, and what the fund has continued to earn, he paused. Just over $280,000, which transfers to you, directly. The paperwork is ready. I thought about the ramen, the 5 a.m. coffee shifts, the shoes I'd decided I couldn't afford, the semester I'd almost dropped out because I'd miscalculated my budget by $400 and didn't know how I'd cover it. My own money, funding my mother's countertops. The seagull flew away. They arrived on day 5. I heard my mother before I saw her. The particular rhythm of heels on hospital linoleum, confident, proprietary, the walk of someone who has decided in advance that the room belongs to them. She swept in ahead of my father, ahead of Meredith, arms already open. The hug performed before she'd even cleared the doorway. I didn't move to meet it. She had to complete the gesture around a body that didn't participate. We came as fast as we could, baby, she said into my hair. The Louvre was open yesterday, I said. I saw the photos. She pulled back. Her face did something complicated. A flicker, quickly managed, the brief visibility of the machinery behind the expression. Grace, you were at the Eiffel Tower while I was on the operating table, I said. Meredith posted a photo. You replied to a comment. A beat. We didn't know how serious. The hospital called 67 times, I said. Dr. Amara Osei herself called 4 times. The attending surgeon, 14 years of neurosurgery. She called you 4 times. My mother opened her mouth, and then Meredith walked in, carrying shopping bags, into my hospital room. Tote bags, actually. The stiff paper kind with rope handles that come from boutiques. 3 of them. She was looking at her phone as she walked, and she glanced up with the bright, slightly distracted expression of someone who has arrived at an event they were obligated to attend. You look better than I expected, she said. My grandfather, sitting in the chair in the corner, made a sound I can only describe as involuntary. I had brain surgery, I said. Meredith tilted her head slightly, the way you do when something is technically true, but doesn't feel relevant to the current conversation. I know, she said. It was so scary when we heard, but you look totally fine. Anyway, we cut the trip 2 days short, so, we're here. I looked at her standing there with her boutique bags in an oncology recovery room, and something in me went very, very quiet. Sit down, I said. All of you. My father took the soft approach first. He always did. It was his most reliable negotiation tactic. Tired eyes, measured voice, carefully calibrated remorse. We failed you, he said. I know that. I know you know, I said. Here's what I also know. Grandpa offered to pay my tuition. You called him 4 times over 4 years and collected 4 checks totaling $153,000. My tuition was covered by scholarships I earned. The money went into your house. Silence so complete I could hear the monitoring equipment in the hallway. My mother started to speak. Don't, my grandfather said. One word. No volume. Absolute temperature. She stopped. That money was designated for Grace's education and future, he said, looking at my father the way I imagine you look at someone who has confirmed your worst assessment of them. Not your renovation. Not Meredith's engagement party. Not Paris. It was a family discussion, my father started. We all agreed that the household... It was theft, my grandfather said. The word landed like a stone dropped in still water. No drama, just the fact of it. My mother shifted tactics. She was good at this. The pivot, the new angle, the emotional redirect. I had watched her do it my entire life. The tears came. Real ones, I think. I've learned to tell the difference, mostly. And these looked genuine, which almost made it worse. Every time I look at you, I see her, she said. Eleanor, your grandmother. She made me feel worthless for 30 years, Grace. Every room I walked into with your father, she found something to... She pressed her fingers to her mouth, and you have her face. You look exactly like her. I know that's not fair. I know it's not your fault. But every time I looked at you, I felt part of me understood. A small, damaged part that had spent years trying to solve the equation of why. The rest of me remembered being 7 years old, running down the hallway with a drawing I'd made of our family, crayon, construction paper, the kind of drawing that exists only to be held up and witnessed, and watching my mother's eyes move past me toward Meredith without stopping. I'm not her, I said. I never was. You punished a child for a dead woman's sins. My mother covered her mouth. And you... I turned to my father. He was looking at the floor, which was where he'd been looking for most of this conversation. You watched her do it for 22 years. You said nothing because it was easier, because it cost you less than the alternative. He didn't deny it. That was the thing about my father. He was honest in the moments when honesty was no longer useful. Grandpa reached into his jacket and removed a manila envelope, the kind with the metal clasp. He placed it on the bed beside me with the deliberateness of someone completing a gesture they'd planned for a long time. This is yours, he said, transferred directly to an account in your name only. The paperwork was filed this morning. My mother's eyes locked onto that envelope the way I have only ever seen eyes lock onto something when survival instinct overrides social performance. Grace, she said carefully, whatever's in there, we're family. We should talk about this together. I know what you're thinking, I said. And no, you're being selfish, Meredith started. You posted vacation photos while I was in surgery, I said. She went quiet. Meredith, I looked at my sister, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. She was wearing a new blouse I didn't recognize. Her hair was salon fresh. She looked like someone who had spent the last 5 days doing exactly what she'd wanted to do. Do you understand that I was on a table having my skull opened while you were drinking champagne in Paris? She opened her mouth, closed it. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said, and I meant it. This isn't about punishing you. Grandma Eleanor wanted me to have options, to have a life where I never needed to beg anyone for anything, where I could leave a situation that was hurting me. I looked around the room. She was more right than she knew. I looked at my father. Here's what happens next. Grandpa's attorney, Martin Cho, he's been in estate law for 26 years, is filing a formal civil claim against you for the misappropriation of designated educational funds. We have the bank records. We have the original checks, both with memo notations indicating educational use. We have your phone records showing the calls to Grandpa requesting funds in my name. My father's face had gone the particular gray of a man watching a door close. Grace, we also have the receipts from the renovation, I said. Dated. Itemized. The contractor your mother used submitted them to insurance. Martin subpoenaed those 2 weeks ago. You've been planning this? Grandpa's been planning this, I said. Since March. Since he got the verification report. He was going to tell me at graduation. I paused. Then I fell. My mother looked at my father. He looked at the floor. The filing happens Monday, my grandfather said. Unless there is a compelling reason, a documented legal reason, why it shouldn't. No one spoke. My phone buzzed on the blanket beside me. I picked it up, looked at the screen, and every person in that room watched my face do something it apparently hadn't done in 5 days. I smiled. The call was from Dr. Osei's research coordinator, a woman named Claire Bautista, calling from the offices of the National Neurological Research Consortium. I'd applied 8 months earlier for a research fellowship, a 2-year funded position, fully stipended, attached to a clinical trial studying treatment-resistant glioblastoma, the exact category of tumor that was currently the central fact of my life. I'd written the application at 1 a.m. after a 6-hour barista shift, in the notes app of my phone because my laptop was charging in the other room, and I was afraid if I got up, I'd talk myself out of submitting. I'd been offered a position. The coordinator explained explained. The fellowship included full health insurance coverage, a $58,000 annual stipend, and a place in Dr. Osei's ongoing trial, which meant that the physician now managing my care would also be, professionally, my colleague. Dr. Osei recommended you specifically, Claire said. She said she doesn't do that often. She wanted you to know that. I thanked her. I said I'd call back to confirm the details. I set the phone down. My mother was watching me with the careful expression of someone trying to read a situation that has stopped being legible to them. Good news? She said, trying for warmth. Yes, I said. I didn't tell them what it was. That felt important. Not out of cruelty, out of the simple recognition that some things were mine now, and I got to decide what to share and with whom and when. Martin Cho filed the civil claim on Monday. He was 62, former county prosecutor, 26 years in estate and civil law, and he had the particular economy of a man who has learned that the most effective legal maneuvers are also the quietest ones. He filed on my behalf for $153,400, the total of the 4 checks my father had misappropriated, plus legal fees and documented consequential damages, which included 4 years of unnecessary employment and the financial stress of supporting myself through school on money I hadn't needed to earn. I was not in the room when he filed. I was in my hospital bed watching a documentary about deep-sea fish, which felt appropriate somehow. Creatures that had adapted to survive in complete darkness, building their own light from the inside. My father retained an attorney by end of business Monday. The attorney, according to Martin, immediately attempted to negotiate a private settlement. Martin's response, relayed to me in a phone call that evening, was 3 words. See you Thursday. The thing about civil claims is that they become public record. And public records, in a world with the internet, have a way of being found. A family friend, someone who'd attended my parents' anniversary party 2 years ago, someone my mother had posted photos with on vacation, someone in that particular social orbit of polished suburban normalcy my parents had always inhabited, sent my mother a text on Tuesday asking if everything was okay. My mother called me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. She texted, "Can we please just talk, Grace? As a family." I typed back, "Martin Cho is the point of contact now. His number is in the email he sent you." My father called my grandfather. Grandpa listened to whatever was said, then, according to what he told me later, replied, "You should have thought about this before you cashed the first check," and hung up. Meredith sent me a DM on Instagram. Not a text. A DM, which told me she'd looked at my profile, which told me she was thinking about optics. The DM said, "I want you to know I didn't know about the money. I genuinely didn't. I know that doesn't fix anything. I just needed to say it." I looked at it for a long time. Then I replied, "I believe you. That doesn't change what happened, but I believe you." She didn't respond. Maybe she'd expected something different. Maybe she'd expected me to open a door. I had opened a door, just not the one she wanted. Treatment started on a Wednesday. Concurrent radiation and chemotherapy, the standard protocol for my tumor type, administered at St. Marcus 3 times a week. Dr. Osei walked me through every step with the same unhurried precision she'd used from the beginning. She did not lie to me about the odds or the side effects or the landscape of what the next year would look like. She also did not let me catastrophize, which was equally useful. "You're young," she said. "Your surgical margins were clean. The trial data is promising. None of this is a guarantee, but the variables are in better shape than most of what I see." "Most?" I said. "Grace," she said with something that might have been almost a smile. "You're a biochemistry valedictorian. You know what clinical statistics mean." "I know what they mean," I said. "I'm asking anyway." "Yes," she said. "Most." I appreciated the honesty. I always had. Rachel, my college roommate, the woman who'd been standing in the corner of my hospital room when my family arrived, and had made a sharp sound when Meredith walked in with her boutique bags, drove me to every treatment appointment for the first 6 weeks. She'd graduated alongside me, had a job starting in August at a biotech firm in the city, and had reorganized her entire life around my treatment schedule without being asked and without making it a conversation. I tried to tell her once how much it meant. She said, "I know. Stop talking about it. What do you want from Panera?" The civil claim settled out of court 11 weeks after Martin filed. My father's attorney approached Martin the week before the scheduled hearing with a written offer. Martin brought it to me on a Thursday afternoon, sitting across from me at a folding table in my new apartment, a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like old wood and good coffee, which I'd signed a lease on the day my account transfer cleared. The offer was for $110,000. My father's attorney had included a letter explaining that the full $153,400 was not liquid, and that settling now would avoid the expense and publicity of a full hearing. I looked at the offer. I looked at Martin. "What's your read?" I asked. "It's below what you're owed," he said, "but the counter offer is yours to decide. Can we go after the rest?" "We can," he said. "It'll take longer. It'll be in public record through the full hearing. It will be, in all likelihood, reported on, given that your father's financial advisory practice has clients who follow local news." I thought about that. "Counter with 140, I said. "Give them 72 hours. They accepted within 24. The money arrived via wire transfer on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee when the notification came through, $140,000, clearing into the account that also held the fund from Grandma Eleanor. I sat with it for a while, the number on a screen, the weight of what it represented. Then I called Rachel. "It came through," I said. "Good," she said. "I'm taking you to dinner. Nice dinner. Don't argue." "I'm not arguing," she said, "but you should know I'm going to order the lobster." "Order 2, I said. My parents have not contacted me since the settlement. That was 6 months ago. My mother sent a single text 3 days after the wire transfer cleared that said, I hope someday you'll understand that we loved you in the only way we knew how. I read it. I thought about it for a few days. Then I replied, I know. I also know that wasn't enough. I hope you find a better way. She didn't respond. My father has not reached out at all. I don't know if that's pride or shame or some combination that doesn't have a clean name. I've stopped trying to categorize his silences. Meredith and I have talked twice. Real conversations, not DMs. She'd called unexpected on a Sunday night, and I'd answered mostly out of surprise. We talked for an hour. She told me things about our childhood I'd known and things I hadn't. She told me she'd been in therapy for 2 months. I thought I was the favorite, she said. I didn't realize what that cost you. I know, I said. Does that matter? She asked. That I didn't know? I thought about it honestly. It matters a little, I said. Not as much as what you do now. She's been consistent since then. She shows up when she says she will. She doesn't perform. We're not close. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way sisters are supposed to be. But we're talking. That's something. Grandpa and I have dinner every Sunday. He drives his 10-year-old Buick to my apartment and brings something he's cooked, which is always either pot roast or a vegetable soup. That is somehow both extremely simple and extremely good. We eat at my kitchen table and argue about news and talk about Grandma Eleanor, who I'm learning more about every week. Her stubbornness, her laugh, the way she'd once returned a piece of expensive jewelry my grandfather had bought her because she thought the money would be better used elsewhere. She would have liked you, he said one Sunday, in the way that meant something larger than the sentence itself. I have her face, I said. More than that, he said. You have her sense of what things are worth. I'm 6 months into the fellowship. The research is extraordinary. I spend my days in the same hospital where I woke up not knowing if I'd survive, working alongside Dr. Osi and a team of 7 other researchers studying the mechanisms that make tumors like mine resistant to standard treatment. The irony is not lost on me. The disease that collapsed my life is also the thing I'm now spending my life studying. I don't know what to call that. I've decided I don't need to call it anything. My own treatment continues. The latest imaging showed the residual mass has not grown. Dr. Osei used the word encouraging. I have learned over the past 8 months to hold encouraging exactly as much as it weighs. No more, no less. I live alone, which I find I like. My apartment has good light and a bookshelf I built from scratch using a YouTube tutorial and the wrong screwdriver. I've started cooking actual food, which sounds minor and isn't. I bought shoes I liked at full price without calculating what I was losing. My grandmother set aside a fund before I was born. She called it, in her handwriting on the letter Grandpa gave me, a freedom fund. The freedom, she'd written, to leave what harms you. The freedom to stay where you're valued. The freedom to build something that belongs only to you. I think about that letter a lot. She'd never met me. She'd died before I took my first breath, but she'd looked ahead into a future she'd never see and decided that whoever this girl would be, she deserved a way out. I have the letter framed on my wall. The frame is cheap, a plain black one from the drugstore. Someday I'll get a nicer one. For now, it's exactly what it needs to be. I collapsed in front of 3,000 people on the best day of my life, and I woke up to the only person who had stayed. The rest of it, the money, the settlement, the filing, the text message about the Louvre, that's not the story. The story is my grandfather's hand, the navy suit, the pocket square. The fact that he'd been sitting in that chair for 3 days in the same clothes, refusing to leave because someone needed to be there when I opened my eyes. The story is that when I finally looked up the definition of family, the real one, not the one my parents used as a collection plate, it fit him exactly. Everything else was paperwork, and I had very good documentation.